Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for your engagement. As you know, this event today is a part of a series of events, 9 of which are occurring during the legislative session. This is actually our 4th event. Our first one featured Comptroller Glenn Hager. We also have had John Turner, State Representative John Turner, and we've had Steve Love combined with State Senator Nathan Johnson. And today is our 4th particular meeting during this legislative session. And today we're very privileged to have with us our, at least my favorite state representative, and I know Amanda Rocco's favorite state representative, representing District 108. His name is Morgan Meyer. I think most of you know Morgan. He's done yeoman's work in the legislature over now. This is your 4th term.
Yes, sir.
And just reelected to his 4th term, and we just couldn't be more pleased to have him here with us today. He's also the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee this year, and starting this year, and we can't thank him enough for that service to the state and to our community. And we're going to ask him to tell us a little bit about actually what does the Ways and Means Committee do? What are they responsible for? That's just one of the agenda items we have today. But with that in mind, we're going to turn it over to Morgan to at least give us a high-level overview of what's happening now that we're 2 months into the session. Give us a little bit of a flavor for what's happening, hit on a couple of topics that he's most particularly interested in, and then we'll have a series of questions from Morgan that will be moderated by Jeff Kittner, our Chief Operating Officer. And then, of course, if you have any questions for him as we go through the process, please put them in the chat, and Jeff will call on you to actually ask those questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Meyer. So Morgan, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to be with the chamber. Always enjoy these type of interactions and being able to give you all a little bit of an overview and answer any questions. And also on the line is Nick Watt. And Nick, if you don't mind waving, Nick is my chief of staff. So to the extent I don't know the answer to your question, which shockingly occurs every now and again, Nick, we can always follow up with Nick and we will get you guys an answer. Just because we can't do it the next, however much time we have allotted today, we're happy to answer any questions y'all might have about session, about particular legislation, and overall what we're going to be doing here in Austin. For us, there's been a couple of things going on over the past, call it 12 months, that have certainly altered what I think many of us thought session was going to look like. We got out of session 2 years ago, and you start taking a look at, all right, one of the main issues, which is still a very top level issue for me, is protecting the funding for the HB3 and specifically for me, Dallas Independent School District and Highland Park Independent School District, and the great strides we made there. I'm currently the chair of Ways and Means. I was just appointed that this session. However, my last 2 sessions, I've served on the Public Education Committee, the Ways and Means, and I would love to serve again, the chairman of Ways and Means and actually chairman of State Affairs. We cannot serve on any other substantive committee. So, but I do still tightly track what is going on in the public education world. But since obviously the end of session last time around, we have had COVID, we have had racial unrest, we have had a winter storm that we haven't had in 100 years. And so there are new issues which crop up between sessions. And just by way of background, y'all, I know everyone on this call knows, but we as a state legislature meet every other year for 140 days. And then the only other time we may meet is if the governor calls a special session. And my only point to that is, since the beginning of 2020, which was one heck of a year, we are not in session at that point in time. So we couldn't pass any legislation to affect any change. Now is the time when we are in session that we can pass bills out of the House and out of the Senate to get to the governor's desk to address those concerns that I just told you about. Again, for me, preserving HB3 funding, especially in light of COVID, is paramount. I think that we cannot take a step backwards from the funding that we promised schools, and we certainly cannot do it in a pandemic environment. The schools need more money, not less. And I will tell you, we've had some good news as it relates to the budget from Comptroller Hager. And I met with he and his team a couple of weeks ago after being appointed Ways and Means Chair. And, you know, at that point in time, I think maybe a month or month and a half ago, maybe a little bit later, we were looking at a $4.5 billion deficit. You know, currently we're looking at about a $900,000 deficit. However, that could be made up by the cuts in the governor's funding to agencies. And additionally, just this past weekend, of course, with the federal legislation that's coming down, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but our budget is looking much, much better than it was 6 months ago. And focusing on education funding as we do, I've been following it very closely. I've been speaking with a number of members on the Pub Ed committee, and everyone is committed to fully funding, as we did back in 19, HB3, and making sure we're funding for public education. But I also am an advocate for and believe we have to look at increased funding, and specifically as it relates to, because I have three kiddos. I have a 9th grade daughter, 7th grade daughter, and my son is in 2nd grade. And we have really good broadband where we live. We have really, really good internet. However, what the pandemic has shown is there is a gulf, there is a divide, and it's not just rural and it's not just urban, of kids who don't have access to solid internet being at a stark disadvantage to children who do. And we cannot have that type of divide where our kids' success in school is based upon their access to the internet. So I feel as if this session I'll be pushing for, and I know Representative Ashby has a bill to address this to an extent, about broadband access for kids throughout our state. So that's going to take additional funds. We're going to have to find that money, because that has to be a priority, is making sure that our kids continue to receive a fantastic education. Additionally, as it relates to education, I was one of the first, if not the first, legislator to call this summer for the waiver of the STAR exam. I don't feel it's fair, again, for kids with different economic backgrounds and access to internet to be graded on or compared to peers who might have a better situation for them to learn in than another child. I was happy to see that the Commissioner of Education, and I believe the governor as well, call it 2 months ago, said, hey, look, we're going to administer the test, but we're not going to penalize the kids. I think that's, that was kind of my fallback position in my request to them was, hey, waive it. But if not, let's make sure not penalize the kids. So our children will not be penalized for how they do on the STAR exam this coming year. Additionally, just in the past week, it was announced that the governor is going to extend the hold harmless provision, which basically says, hey, look, depending upon the number of kids, we're not going to penalize you for not having kids in seats, because that's how we fund public education, right? Is a number of children who are actually, it's an attendance credit. So how many kids are sitting there? Well, in this current environment, there's, you've got kids who are not showing up to school. You have kids who are learning virtually, of course. And so you've got to kind of make that balance. So for the remainder of the school year, the hold harmless will be put in place. So public education funding is certainly of concern. Next, and right up there, there's no level, y'all, so don't think I'm like, this is the most important, no, just right up there again is continuing, obviously, our battle with COVID and making sure we get as many vaccines into arms as we possibly can. And additionally, we need to make sure and continue to act responsibly. We need to continue to wear a mask, to hand sanitize, to stand 6 feet when possible. We need to continue to do those things. And we, as a legislature, need to see what we can do to help facilitate from a state level, and then working with our local counties on getting as many vaccines in arms as we possibly can, and the best way for us to do that. Another issue, of course, is the economy and COVID. We have to make sure that we encourage and get businesses to be able to reopen in the safest manner possible. I was glad to see that Comptroller Hager, which specifically affects my committee, pushed the deadline back for the franchise tax, if I'm not mistaken, Nick, to June 15th. Is that right? I think that's correct. Okay, very good. So to June 15th. Well, that's great. Well, there's a bill that I'll be having heard in my committee by Chairman Guerin this coming Monday that deals with PPP and not having a franchise tax on that. And we're going to move that bill, and we're going to move that bill quickly to be able to allow folks to get back on their feet, to get back opening business, get back doing what they need to do to have a good, strong economy. So those are some of the main issues that I see for us on a go-forward basis, but there are many more, y'all. I mean, but we can't forget about one of my big issues that I have really focused on the last 3 sessions, and have a number of pieces of legislation this coming session is combating human trafficking. And we can't, stop the fight on those because we have these bigger issues, because that issue to me is as big as the others. It's an important issue that we cannot forget about and pay attention to, because we have these other big ticket items. We do. But then we definitely have to continue to fight that good fight as well. And then the other major issue before us will be redistricting, and we will see how that goes during this session. I kind of give you a good overview, Ken.
Very nice. Thank you. Really
Yes,
appreciate that. And that's a great, it's a great foundation builder for a good discussion here. I know both Jeff and I have multiple questions that we want to pose to you, but let me remind everybody that if you have a question, put it in the chat or send a text directly to Jeff if you've got his number, and we will call on you. We'll ask you to unmute, and we'll call on you to actually ask the question. So, Jeff, if you don't mind, I might ask one real quick question that really has nothing to do with what Morgan just talked about. Tell us a little bit about the balancing act of a state representative relative to the fact that you have a very active family life. You have a very active business life at your law firm, and you're trying to chair a major committee in Austin during this 150 days. Tell us about that balancing act and how it works, and has it been okay for you? Has it been comfortable for you and your family?
Well, define comfortable, but yes, I mean, I think anyone who does this, their spouse is key, and mine is no different. And she's not on this call, so but Amanda, if you want to tell her what I'm about to say, that's cool too. But for me, and I know every member in here, your spouse is the key to getting the job done and doing it the right way. I mean, for us, Keena runs our show back home, but we have a huge support network of friends, in our community who help run carpool, who help get kids to school, who make sure my 8-year-old son is biking with someone else's 8-year-old son, and that truly is a huge balancing act for us. And then honestly, I try to dive in when I'm back home. Keena, was able to kind of take a weekend, and I was with the 3 kids, and I had, a couple of 7th grade girls volleyball tournaments, 9th grade girls lacrosse, track at 6:30 in the morning, and another volleyball tournament yesterday afternoon. And I think it's that balance of, look, when I get home, I really, as much as I possibly can, try to focus on the kids, because they don't want to talk to me about tax policy. They don't want to talk to me about COVID relief or winterization of our electric grid. And I think it's that ability to balance the two, where if you do that, you can absolutely do this 110% and full on, which we do. But I feel it's important to take that step back and be able to spend time with my kids and, play horse with my son in our driveway yesterday afternoon before I hit the road. That's really important. And then the other, thing for me is my firm, Wick Phillips, where I am a partner, is I've got partners who understand, and partners who really do view this, and I'm not kidding, they view this as their contribution to public service within our community. And I would not be able to do this but for my partners at Wick Phillips saying, hey, look, Morgan, we understand what you're doing. And to your point, Ken, especially with the heavy lift of Ways and Means, that what you're doing is helping our state move forward. And I couldn't have better partners at my law firm that allow for me to do it. So it really, if it was just me, I'd be in trouble. But it's all around me, whether it's my partners, whether it's my wife, all of that, and our friends that help us balance everything that we are doing.
Great. Thank you, Morgan. Thanks for that. And thank you for your service. I mean, it's just amazing when you consider all that you have on your plate, but we really appreciate it.
It's an honor to do it. It really is.
Yeah. Jeff, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Chairman Meyer. Ken, you referenced this earlier, but before we get into a little more substance, Morgan, tell us exactly what your committee does, what Ways and Means does, and what your role as chairman entails there.
So overall, we see all the state revenue and tax policy for the state of Texas from a House perspective. We have 11 members. And so basically the revenue that's generated for the budget and the taxing policy come through our committee. So I will work closely with Chairman Bonin of the Appropriations Committee, because every time we provide, as you might imagine, a tax abatement, a tax exemption in some, and it costs X number of dollars, those are less funds that are going to our budget. And so it's truly a balancing act, and it's an act of me and I'm sorry, everyone, Chairman Bonin is chairman of the Appropriations Committee. So we work hand in hand to make sure, or where we can see new revenue could be generated, possibly. All of that is a give and a take as it relates to our budget. So we oversee all of that, all of those tax policy and revenue generating for the state of Texas. And I had no idea until I became chairman of the committee how many tax experts apparently there are in the House, because there are a lot of bills filed, and that will be coming through our committee.
That's helpful. Thanks very much for that explanation. So something else you touched on, which is front and center from our legislative agenda from the 86th session, was HB3. And as you mentioned, in the 86th session, a number of groups came together, including this chamber and many other education groups, to advocate for the passage of HB3, which was a transformational school finance reform bill, and really appreciate your advocacy on that particular issue. We did hear from the comptroller back in January, and we do understand that the outlook is better than expected. But with revenue still being down, and I know you touched on this before, are you concerned that other legislators might try to pull money away from HB3? And what can we in the business community do to make sure that doesn't happen?
I'm not concerned, and it, from hearing from both Republicans and Democrats alike, it is a top priority to maintain the funding. And I can tell you we also have a new Speaker of the House, Dade Phelan, and Dade has committed as well to continue the funding for public education, because we all see, and again, that's Democrats, that's Republicans, the necessity of funding public education. And so when people ask me, yes, there's always a concern, I guess, but the fact that I have not heard one member, not a single member, and we've been here for 8 weeks, talk about, well, maybe let's just pull back a little as to what we did. It really has been truly the opposite of, we need to reinforce what we did, because now we're in such a unique time period. Any less dollars are actually the impact will be even greater on the schools and school districts if we were to take money away now than when we weren't in a pandemic. And so I know that we are all committed to continuing to fund that. And like I said, I am in constant contact to where they're not going to take my phone calls, being the Pub Ed committee members, to make sure that DISD and Highland Park ISD, my two school districts, are in the same position on a go-forward basis.
Well, thank you for your advocacy on that particular issue. I know you've probably seen quite a few letters come in from our chamber and others in support of that, and appreciate the assurances that money will stay where it is. So thanks for your advocacy on that particular issue. One other issue you talked about was, and we touched on this briefly, was the winter storm and the reactions to all that. We had some testimony on that last month, and where do you see all that going? Do you think that's going to be the issue focused on during the rest of the session?
I think it's going to be a major issue we focus on during the remainder of the session. And it was one that, quite frankly, I don't think any of us in January saw that it was going to be a major issue that we were going to be focusing on. I do know that even in the past week or so, or even less, we have seen a number of bills filed addressing different areas, different aspects, and whether it's the makeup of the ERCOT board or what winterization requirements there are. I know that there are a number of pieces of legislation that are hitting the system. I know that there are a number of them that have low bill numbers in the House, which means, just so y'all are aware, the low bill numbers are reserved for really, really important issues. So I know that we are taking this head on. I know that Chairman Patty and Chairman Goldman, who had their hearings a week and a half ago, are really leading the forefront of this. And really, I think you're going to see it's going to be one of the most important issues that we tackle. But we cannot, as I said, just because we've got to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. We have to. There are too many important issues out there that we're going to have to be able to address multiple big issues at the same time. And I'm confident that that myself and my colleagues will get it done.
Great. Thanks very much. One other big issue that is coming up is one of our chamber's priority initiatives for this session, which is reducing the number of uninsured Texans. And as you know, Senator Nathan Johnson has been advocating both the public health and economic imperative for the expansion of Medicaid. and this is the chamber's priority issue for this session. Traditionally, there has been resistance to the expansion of this, mostly from the Republican Party, but there do appear to be some openings this session. What are your thoughts on what the House might do with Medicaid expansion this session?
Well, I'm one of the few Republicans in prior sessions who did support expansion of Medicaid in certain circumstances, and whether that was special needs children, whether that was new moms, whether I will continue to support, targeted Medicaid expansion. And to your point, yes, it's been a contentious issue, but I do think it's we're in the pandemic. Like we got to make sure people get insurance coverage. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know how else to be straightforward. Again, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. I know I'm more of a unique Republican in this area, but we are where we are, and so we're in a unique time, which is why I think you're seeing the dialogue change. I think you're seeing the conversation change. I think you're seeing this is a time for folks to react and realize we're in a unique circumstance. And unique circumstance is going to take some additional courage to make some changes to make sure that we do our job, which first and foremost in my mind as state government, our job is to protect the healthiness of our citizens. And so to me, I think this is going to be, again, yet another priority on which we're going to have to push the ball forward and probably push a little bit into some uncharted territories. I don't know what it's going to look like. I know members have different, Republican members have some great ideas. Democrat members have some ideas as well. And so everyone's got different ideas on how best to accomplish it. But I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle where we meet on finding to make sure that we all have the common goal of getting as many Texans covered as we possibly can.
Yeah, and we phrased our priority as reducing the number of uninsured Texans. So that could look
I like it. That's good.
It could look like a number of different things, whether it's Medicaid expansion or 1115 waiver expansion or whatever it may be. But
however we need, to your point, however we reach that goal, we need to get there.
Exactly. Thank you for that. You also mentioned redistricting. Give us a little primer about how that's going to work and what you think that'll look like for this session.
I am not on the redistricting committee. And so, my knowledge, honestly, is where y'all's are about redistricting. I know, it may come later, as I'm told, as we receive the data later to be able to address the issue. And so it may require us to come back in a special session to get the job done. But as I understand it, we're waiting on the data. And once we receive that, there'll be more of a discussion. It's just really hard to start doing it without the precise, information that is necessary.
That's something that we're all looking forward to learning more about. And we may, in fact, have a special program on redistricting either as part of this series or part of our Civics for Business series, which we offer outside of the session. So hope you'll be able to join us for that. And we look forward to learning more.
Yes, sir.
What about other bills? Are there other less profile bills, either that you filed or that you're tracking, or anything else that you want to touch on that's happening right now in the session that we may not be aware of, things that are under the radar?
Well, again, for our legislative agenda, we are looking for different ways to, for me in particular, we've got the school finance is still a big issue for me. The funding aside, we still have a system which I think could work better as it relates to Robin Hood, as it relates to, how we fund public education. My districts, DISD and HPISD, both were to pay out, and it's because, DISD has a lot of land and Highland Park doesn't have as much land, but it's worth a lot. And so both of my districts are in situations where I still think we need reform. And so we filed some legislation to address that on a go-forward basis on some fixes that we could see in making it more equitable and making sure that the districts who need money get it, but also make sure that the districts who are paying out it's in a fair and fundamental way. Additionally, we have filed some additional legislation as it relates to human trafficking, as I stated. We'll be pushing the ball forward on those issues. And then we will have some ways and means issues, some tax policy that we will be pushing forward on a go-forward basis. There's some cleanup from SB2, which was the big tax bill last session, that we'll be looking to do. There's some other legislation dealing with renewal of Chapter 313, which is where basically it's a company comes in and enters into an agreement with the school district, and if they come bring their plant and their employees, they can get a tax abatement. Well, that's up for renewal this year, so that will be coming through our committee as well. So I think you'll see a robust discussion on that issue as well. So there are a myriad of different issues, as there are every session. And so my only point is we've got big lifts, and those are important. They really, really are. But we can't forget about the other issues that are important to each one of our districts back home.
Thanks very much. Last question from me before we open it up to the audience questions. And a reminder, if you thanks for the questions that y'all have been sending so far. But if you have questions for Chairman Meyer, post them in the chat or send them to me privately, and we'll call on you to ask them. Chairman, as you know, this chamber has a long history in transportation through the repeal of the Wright Amendment, the development of the North Dallas Tollway. So that's always been an important issue for us. What are some of the big issues you're seeing related to transportation and infrastructure this session?
Well, again, I think where the infrastructure, and to be honest with you, Jeff, where it really kind of hits home is the electric grid is infrastructure. I mean, that's where, the transportation, to me, it's something which is an investment and not a cost. I feel as if folks, really need to kind of focus in on the fact when you're investing in infrastructure, you're investing in roads, you're investing in schools, what you're doing is you are attracting when folks say, hey, this is a cost, this is a cost. No, it's not, it's an investment. That's why 1,000 new folks come here every day, is because they're coming because our infrastructure is so strong, and they're coming because they, bringing their plants, bringing their employees, bringing their headquarters. I mean, we've seen, as the governor has made a great point, every time we get a new fantastic business here from wherever the state is, it's because of our infrastructure, making sure when folks are saying, oh, we need to cut back, they need to view it just like you view funding public education, as an investment, not as a cost. Because I think when you start viewing it as a cost, you can start cutting it and say, X, Y, we don't need to spend that much on roads. We don't need to spend that much on the electric grid, whatever it might be. But you got to realize there's an ROI on that in a huge amount, which sometimes is not even quantifiable, that you need to make sure that you invest in it. But I will say, Jeff, from the infrastructure point of view, I think the focus is squarely on our grid and how best to go forward on that.
Yeah, and that's an important issue, which, as you referenced, is not one that we anticipated we'd be looking at this session. So there always seems to be a surprise issue, and I think that one was the one for this particular session.
Correct.
Okay, so let's take some questions from the attendees, and our first question is from our board chair, Tina Young with MarketWave. Tina, hi, how are you?
Good. Thank you for being here, Chairman Meyer. I just had a question about your reaction to Governor Abbott's lifting the mask mandate. I know in your opening remarks, you said we need to stay healthy and keep wearing a mask. But what do you think the impact of his decision is on business? Maybe positive, negative, neutral? Some thoughts on that?
What I'm seeing when I'm back home, and I know this is going to take effect Wednesday, is I think the folks who were wearing the masks are going to continue to wear their masks. I do. I feel like it's kind of, it's kind of been part of our society. What I'm seeing back home are a number of people who are still maintaining the distance, using hand sanitizer. I have like 4 of them in my car, and wearing the mask. I think that folks have the individual right and freedom to do it, to wear a mask or not. But I think what you're going to see, and I think, I don't know about y'all, if your view of the world is different when you're seeing it around your neighborhoods, but I'm still seeing folks wearing masks. And I know it's this Wednesday, I get that. But what I'm saying is, and I think you'll see that continue as businesses start to reopen in a safe manner. And then it's up to the businesses to be able to say, hey, look, you need to wear a mask when you come in our business or our restaurant or our bar. And quite frankly, I haven't seen one, and I'm not saying they're not out there, y'all. I just haven't seen one in my area that's like, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. We're totally going no mask, no social. I have not seen any of that. I have not even seen anything close to that. And what I've seen is an affirmation, as rightly they have the right to do or not, depending upon the business, or they have that right to do it. And I think you're going to see overwhelmingly that businesses maintain, the requirement that you wear a mask and to be socially responsible and socially distanced.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing that too, just that the local response.
That's where I'm going off of that.
Is different. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tina, for that question. Next question is from Liz Morse with RISD. Hi, Liz.
Hey there. Hello,
Hi.
Chairman Meyer. Yes, I'm wondering about the billions of dollars that are going to be allocated to schools in the federal stimulus legislation that is, I think, going to pass. It looks like it will. How do you think the state's going to handle these funds? And will the schools get the majority of what's designated for them, or is the state going to put some requirements on it? how do you see the distribution of those funds happening?
This is going to be a great question for Nick to follow up on once we actually see what they do and how they do it. Because I just don't want to guess. I mean, I think it's great, and I can't remember the number, but it was a huge amount that was.
It's like $128 billion.
Yeah, it's I mean, just fantastic, and I just don't want to honestly guess, because that's what I would be doing. Like, oh, hey, this is how they're going to tag it, or this is what they're going to do with it. But we will absolutely follow up, and if we could, if you don't mind, or however we get your contact information. If anyone else wants this information as well, we will be tracking that closely, as you might imagine already. We are happy to keep you in the loop on that. Just as it goes forward, we can say, hey, look, this is what TEA has provided. This is what the committee is looking at, and happy to keep you in the loop. I just don't want to guess. I do think it's fantastic we're getting the money. I just don't know what form it's going to look like.
Do you think will it go through your committee?
No, I don't think so, Nick, unless you think differently. I think it would probably go through appropriations or pub ed, right, Nick?
Okay.
Yeah. Anytime, we're talking about spending that money, it wouldn't go through our committee per se. And I think more of that is,
I didn't know.
Yeah, it's a good question though.
Okay. Well, we're hopeful that we'll get a big chunk, because we see some big bills in the future to try to get our kids back up to speed. Thank you.
I'm absolutely hopeful with you, Liz.
Thank you. Thanks.
Of course.
Thanks, Liz, for the question. Next question is from Ken Malcolmson.
Oh, Ken.
Someone we all
There you
know.
go. I was just trying to unmute, and I was already unmuted. So in any event, so Morgan, there was a an interesting story in the Dallas Morning News this weekend about how to approach your legislators. Dave Lieber wrote it in his column. And our mayor, Eric Johnson, who served for 4+ terms in the legislature as well, his suggestion was it's much better to approach your state rep or your state senator through a telephone call versus a letter. What's your take on that? How would you prefer to hear from your constituents?
I think every legislator has a different experience. Honestly, for us, we take the calls, we take the letters, we take the emails, all the same way. Our intake is exactly the same. We take a look at the issue. I review it, or Nick or whomever, we take a look at the issue and then respond. I would just say, in my experience, is whatever you're most comfortable doing, to me, is the best way to do it. A phone call is fantastic, but there are a lot of folks who still like, and we get them, a lot of them, and it's great, still like to put pen to paper or prefer an email so they can see that it was received. That, to me, I just think folks need to reach out in the way that's most comfortable to them, and do so, whether it's phone, letter, email, text, however you want to do it. And that, to me, is my experience. And Nick, I don't know if you have a different one, considering you handle a lot of that.
No, I think what you said is right. Our office policy is anytime anyone calls, emails, even texts us, writes in, we intake it, and we have a system where we keep track if they support or oppose a bill or want to see certain type of legislation. No matter the method, we pay close attention to it, and we also reach back out in a way that's easiest for us, and typically that's a phone call or email. And we can go more in depth with somebody who's written in. So like the chairman said, I mean, any method, if we, as long as we receive it, I think fax is the only thing now that we're not, I don't even think we have a fax line set up anymore, but every other method is great.
Yeah,
the other thing I would be, Ken, is one thing that I say this, y'all, on pretty much all of these when I get a question like this, Ken, is only one of the things that, after my first session, I heard it, second session, third session, I'm sure I'll hear it after this session, is why in the world did you vote that way? Or why in the world did you file that bill? And I said, all right, well, okay, fine. Did you reach out? Did you? No, I didn't say, well, it's kind of hard after the fact. I mean, I certainly am happy to explain why I voted a certain way or why I filed a bill or an amendment or whatever. But just my only point on this is be proactive. There are a lot of folks who feel like they may bother you or that is the job to me. The job is listening to my constituents and hearing and voicing their concerns or understanding where they are on a particular issue, because I make this point quite a bit. this is House District 108's office, not Morgan Meyer's office. And while yes, my opinions certainly go into a lot of it, I take the input from my district, and that helps shape my position. Is the input and who I hear from, when I hear from, and what my constituents have to say. That is my job, to vote that particular way, to advocate for those issues. And that's why public school funding, I hear about that. I am a hard driving champion, because that is very, very important to my district, and I hear from them. And so my only point really is, as I said a moment ago, is be proactive, because that's my job, is to listen to you and advocate on your behalf.
And as a follow-up to that, Jeff, sorry to interrupt, because I see several other questions coming in, but as a follow-up to that, this is one of our number one priorities at our chamber and many other chambers, and that's around engagement, civic engagement, and whether that be voting or whether that be communicating with your representatives, and it's absolutely essential. And that's why we're so proud of having groups of people like this come together and have the ability to interact with people like yourself, Chairman Meyer. So, and then as a follow-up to that is, what's the likelihood of being able to see you in person during this session, especially since we're now getting down to the last 2.5 months of the session, which is going to get even harder, I'm sure. But what's the likelihood of being able to actually be in person with you?
We are still taking in-person meetings, but and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have safety protocols. And we have it by appointment only. So we're not doing anyone walking in. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. And if you would like to meet in person, we do it in a socially distanced, safe way. And if you would like to do the Zoom instead of the phone call, we are happy to do that. I will say, as you guys might imagine, not a ton of folks are taking us up on that. But I still feel as if I'm here working and someone wants to talk to me in person and do it in a safe type of environment, they have that right, and that's part of my job.
So, by being a chairman, do you now have a corner office with many thousand square feet?
Yeah, no, same different office, but same hall I was on my last 3 sessions as well.
Okay, all right.
Just to follow up on that, luckily we have access to testing, COVID testing, the rapid test here in the Capitol. So our staff, we test every morning to make sure that, we're showing up negative. And then there's also, right outside of the Capitol, they set up a tent to do testing for folks who want to come in and visit. So, like the chairman said, if you want to set up a in-person meeting, feel free to reach out to us. But yeah, we do have safety protocols in place so that, we're making sure, anyone who visits us, they're negative, as well as our staff too.
Great. Jeff, I noted there's several other questions, so I'll let you deal with that.
All right. Well, thanks, Ken. Thanks for those questions. Next question is from Dev Rastogi with AECOM. Hi, Dev.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Chairman Meyer, thanks for being with us. And, we're excited to hear about that the shortfall in funding is not as great as we thought it was going to be 6 months ago. And so as a firm that deals with infrastructure, is glad to hear your thoughts on infrastructure being an investment, a really important investment for growth in Texas. And so, in the past, we've had tools like public-private partnerships and, funding of toll projects to help us really have a lot of infrastructure options in Texas. And last legislative session, we know that there was some hesitation in those funding tools, and so I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are about putting more tools in our toolkit.
No, I agree. I mean, I do. I think that we have to use whatever tools that we have available to us to help fund infrastructure, to help encourage businesses to get here. By way of example, I'll be carrying a piece of legislation, if you guys are aware, which is North Dallas with the PGA headquarters going in place. I'll be the one carrying the legislation for the PGA and LPGA to be able to access some funds as it relates to the enterprise funds so that we can have the PGA championship, so that we can have possibly the Ryder Cup, which is pretty cool. But I believe in our ability to whether it's funding infrastructure or attracting businesses, that we have to use every tool in the toolbox, because we have other states, just specifically as it relates to that one, I'll use that as an example, who are using those tools to attract businesses, who are using those tools to invest in their infrastructure. And we can't do that one hand tied behind our back. So I'm a big proponent in however we can get our infrastructure funded and really make life easier for Texans on a daily basis. I'm definitely supportive of that.
Thanks, Deb, for that question. Next question is from Dr. John Grabarczyk from University of Phoenix. Hi, Dr. G.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Chairman Meyer. Just curious, with the reduction in driving due to embracing of telecommuting by organizations and transitioning to electric vehicles, if there's been any activity trying to address, the impact on the revenues to the state from those activities.
Not that I'm aware of, but Nick may be able to address this. I haven't seen any type of, just so you know, when dealing with the comptroller's office, we sit down with them, we deal with Glenn, and we deal with other, other folks within the comptroller's office. And I don't know if a negative proves a positive, but the fact that issue has not been raised to me, hey, Morgan, we're going to have a bigger hole due to that has not been raised, but we can take a look, and Nick can follow up to see if there's been any discussion about that, because it just hasn't been discussed with me. Doesn't mean it's not there, but I have a feeling I have been in the room to hear, hey, here's a hole due to A, here's a hole due to B, here's a deficit due to C, and that has not been raised, but we can certainly find that out.
Thanks, Dr. G, for that question. And Chairman, on the topic of things that we're hoping don't really come up much in the session, anything new on Texas Central? I know when we had our legislative preview last year, you had mentioned that you were a strong supporter of that, and we appreciate that. That's a high priority issue for the chamber. But anything happening relative to Texas Central so far?
I am sure that there's probably been legislation. So for Texas Central, to what I have found over the last couple of sessions, it's as much playing defense as it relates to preserving it as it is playing offense. There's not a lot of legislation to help facilitate it more, but there's definitely a lot of legislation which you wouldn't read the bill and think that it applies, but it does. So my job and other legislators like me is, and Nick is, and my entire team, and we are on the lookout for any bill that would adversely affect the rail, because we feel it's such a huge, and for all of us who've been talking about investment in infrastructure, this to me is by definition, investment in infrastructure is this high-speed rail. And we need to do it, and we need to play defense. And I said at the beginning of last session, I'll say at the beginning of this session, that one of my main jobs is to protect that investment and do whatever I can to push that ball forward, because I feel like it's vital infrastructure for our state, and the jobs created and the revenue created. It's just something I get where there are folks who are opposed to it, and I understand why, but from just an overall, for the betterment of the state of Texas, it is something we need to do.
Well, I know that if you see any legislation which puts that in any kind of danger, let us know, because you've got the backing of the business community here in Dallas behind you on that, and greatly appreciate the support there.
Absolutely.
Next question is from our friend Jay Isaacs. Hey, Jay, welcome.
Hey, Jeff, thank you. Representative, thanks for your time today. We appreciate it. There's two bills as a former banker that need some attention.
Okay.
And Nick may want to jot this down, but it's House Bill 654. It's a rules against perpetuities that's pending, that needs some help in helping Texas and people that are doing estate planning. So
what does the bill do, if you don't mind? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What does the bill do? Who's the author? Because then we can take a look at it.
Representative Lucio.
Okay.
House Bill 654.
And we're saying it needs help. It needs to be. I hear people say it needs help. It's either A, they want it to pass, or B, it needs to get better.
We need to get better. We need to get rid of the rules against perpetuities on trust and estate planning issues.
Okay.
So if Nick can take a look at it if you're not familiar with it, and we're trying to get bankers to support, legislators to support that banking legislation today.
Right. And Jay, we can also, after this call, and I have no idea, and it doesn't matter to me if you're in district or not, but you can hop on a call with, if I'm available, me and Nick, or maybe just Nick, and kind of dig into these bills as well. But please tell us the second bill and we'll get started on it.
Happy to do that. Second bill, there, I don't have a number on it, but it's an ATM bill that there's kind of a crash and steal process going on, that folks or bad guys are going out and hooking up a truck to ATMs and yanking them off their foundation. There's been over $25 million worth of damage to banks and their ATMs.
Oh, wow.
There is one of the problems is through COVID, banks have had to close their lobbies. And when you take away the ATM, it takes even more access for customers and your constituents to access their monies. And so there's a bill, and I don't have a number, I can get it for you.
We can track it down.
That would help put some teeth into that crime, because it's very, very prevalent today and across the United States, but specifically here in Texas.
Absolutely, Jay. We will take a look at both, and we will follow back up with you. And you raise a point that I just want to address. There's one other bill which is local in nature and not dealing with banking, but John Turner has a bill that I am joint authoring as it deals with combating drag racing, which has become a big issue in all of Dallas. And we've got, I believe there are 4 or 5 different tools to combat drag racing, which again, Jan, has nothing to do with banking, but it made me think, all right, important to our county. Well, this is definitely an issue for all of us throughout the county. So that's another bill, which Jeff, to your point, like other kind of important topic, that is a very important item and topic for us locally, which, may not raise to the level of the grid, but is 100% important for us back home and to combat throughout the state. So it was just back to your earlier question, Jeff.
Thanks, Morgan. And if you don't mind, can you give us a little more detail on the drag racing bill? Because that is a highly relevant bill for what's happening in the city, because I'm constantly seeing and hearing about drag racing all over, and especially in North Dallas. And whatever we can do to address it on the state level is great.
Yeah, and we can send you a draft of that bill. It's increasing the penalties for drag racing, and it deals with also if you've been convicted of it more than one time. There is, the detention of your car. There are some big ticket items in there that really ramp the penalties dealing with it, because right now it's really there's not much. I mean, there is penalty involved, but it's not to the level which would deter it, apparently, because everyone is continuing to do it. So we're increasing the penalties, and I believe there are 4 or 5 different tools, but Nick can get you guys a draft, and any input y'all have, we're more than welcome to take.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think that's something our public safety committee will be greatly interested in. So
okay.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind sending us that bill draft, we'll definitely take a look at it.
Very good.
Yeah, and I saw our friend Crystal Ratana, who is with Children's Health, but also a council member of Town of Farmers Branch, posted a comment. Crystal, do you want to add something on the drag racing issue?
Sure, thank you so much. No, I appreciate you bringing that up. And it's not only happening, obviously, in Dallas, even in smaller cities that abut the city of Dallas, like Farmers Branch, it's happening along some of those industrial areas. And I really appreciate you sharing that information with even some of our colleagues around the city of Dallas, because it's happening even outside. So thank you so much for that update. Really appreciate it.
Of course. And we'll get you all that legislation, because we'd love input.
Thanks, Crystal, for that. Thanks very much, Chairman, for helping to address that issue, which is pervasive in the city right now. Last question from me. I asked Representative Turner this in thinking about when we had him last month, and thinking about revenue generation opportunities. Any traction on either gambling, online gambling, or legalization of marijuana to increase revenue? Do you think either of those has any possibility of moving ahead this session?
Honestly, I don't see a whole lot of movement as it relates to casinos or legalization of marijuana this session. To the extent that they are revenue generators, you have to be realistic about it. When exactly would a casino generate revenue? How would that help us now? I mean, my point is the impact is met 4 years, 6 years, 8 years down the road. So as it relates to helping us with our current revenue estimates, I'm not seeing a ton of movement right now on either of those issues. Now that, of course, could change, but I'm not seeing a ton of movement.
What about something a little more nuanced like sports betting? We've seen that increase in other states, And that might be a narrow way to approach it. I don't know if you're seeing anything on that more narrow issue of online sports betting.
No, that is one where there have been more conversations, and you're talking about like the online gambling, right? Where you can, yeah, they're definitely, hey, look, not full on casino, but let's take this more cautious approach. And you hear both, to your point, hey, look at the revenue generated, and then, hey, look, this is just a first step into going full on casino. But to your point, Jeff, absolutely more conversation centered around that than actual casinos getting built in the state of Texas in the near future.
Yeah, I think if this is ever going to happen in Texas, it needs to happen on a gradual basis, and that's one way that it could happen. Yeah, thank you very much.
Of course.
Well, Chairman, thank you so much. We're approaching our time, but I want to give you one opportunity to close out with anything else. And if people have questions for you or for your team, how do they go about contacting you? And what do you see for the rest of the session? Things that we can help with.
Well, no, just y'all's engagement is as as Kenneth said, is fantastic. I wish more groups would be as engaged as y'all are. It's great to hear from you. We're not always going to agree on the issues. There are going to be some issues where you're like, what is Meyer doing? And some you'll be like, hey, great job. That just comes with the territory. And luckily I've gotten really comfortable with that. But always know there's going to be an open dialogue. Always know, to me, the most important thing of doing this job is being transparent and honest and saying, hey, look, this is where I stand. Even if I know that someone is fully against a particular bill, it does me nor he or she any good if I kind of skirt the issue. So realize if you reach out to us, my office, me, whatever, we will be completely transparent. You're like, Morgan, I hate whatever bill it is. Well, I'm supporting it and this is why, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you. I had a conversation with a couple of folks I'm carrying legislation they are vehemently opposed to at the end of last week, and they were surprised they got a meeting. I said, I haven't filed the bill yet, but out of respect for y'all and your opinions, let's sit down and tell me where I'm getting this wrong. Okay, after the meeting, I'm still probably going to file the legislation. I'll let them know. But I wanted them to have the ability to have that conversation. And to me, that's important because there are certain issues where a bill may do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, hey, Morgan, I don't really love the X, Y, and Z, but if you tweak it here, change it there, I think it could still accomplish your goals, but in a better fashion. We're always open to those type of thoughts and input, because as each one of you is a member and a leader in your particular industry, I guarantee you know more about your industry than I probably do if I'm not a member of said industry. And so your input is invaluable because you bring an expertise that I need to help me do my job effectively. So with that being said, reach out to Nick, and Nick, can you share your email address and phone number?
Will do. I'll put it in the chat right now.
Yeah, put that in the chat. And then also, I think many of you already have my district director, who I don't know if she's on this or not, Abby Aldine. Abby, are you on?
She's not on.
She's not on. Okay. We can also provide you her information if it's a more local level. Abby is back in Dallas, back in the district, running the show there while I'm here. So feel free to reach out to either, and then we are happy to assist in any way.
Thank you, Chairman. And Abby is always very helpful when we have questions up in the Dallas end. So please do reach out to her. And thank you again for taking the time to do this. As a token of our appreciation for you doing this, we'll be making a donation in your name as well as the name of all of our speakers during our fiscal year to the Austin Street Shelter.
Fantastic.
So thank you again for being here. Thanks to you and your team, to Nick and to Abby and everybody for what you all are doing and for having this dialogue with us. We'll look out for that language on the drag racing bill.
Absolutely.
And thank you, of course, to our sponsors. I want to fully recognize all of our event sponsors. It's AECOM, Bradley, Frostbank, HDR, HNTB, Jacobs, Encore, Texas Health Resources, Children's Health, Reliant, and Pulcinelli. We had some technical difficulties. Virginia Rose with Texas Health Resources was supposed to do the introduction, and unfortunately, we didn't get to hear from her. So you guys were stuck with me and Ken for this. But Virginia, were you able to get reconnected?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again, Chairman, and to you and your team. This has been great, and we'll look forward to continuing the dialogue during the session. And we will leave this line open for a few minutes if anybody would like to continue to network.
Thank you all again.
Thank you, Morgan.
Of course, and thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. You guys are all very busy people, and so I appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to me as well. I really do.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you all.
Yeah.